In December 1984, a 20-year-old man left his San Jose, California home for work and was never seen again. The investigators lacked the forensic tools at the time, but after a 40-year chapter of heartbreak, his family was finally given the answers they had long awaited. On April 15, 1985, a grim discovery was made in Menlo Park. Partial skeletal remains were found in a secluded area. The investigators were cautious in their approach. The remains had deteriorated significantly, and due to the limitations in forensic technology at the time, the police could not link the remains to a person. The investigators continued to pursue leads, but without the ability to confirm the identity of the remains, the case began to lose momentum and slowly went cold. In October 2023, nearly 4 decades after the discovery of the remains, the officials took a critical step towards solving the mystery. The remains were exhumed and submitted for modern DNA analysis in hopes of finally identifying the individual. The San Mateo County Coroner's Office coordinated with Akalma Cemetery and the Sheriff's Office to carry out the exhumation. Once the remains were recovered, a DNA sample was carefully extracted and sent to the California Department of Justice. There, forensic specialists developed a DNA profile from the sample, which was then uploaded to the combined DNA index system. A breakthrough came when CODIS indicated a potential match between the unidentified remains and a DNA sample submitted in 2016 as part of a missing persons case. The investigators reviewed the match and began the process of verifying the relationship between the two samples. In April 2025, the San Mateo County Coroner's Office confirmed there was a strong familial link between the Menlo Park remains and the missing person's DNA sample submitted years earlier. Further testing was conducted to remove any doubt and ensure the results were accurate. Forensic experts carefully examined the genetic data to confirm the connection. On May 23, 2025, the officials publicly announced that the remains found in April 1985 belonged to Brian Edward Jones. Brian was born on January 16, 1964. At 20 years old, he was residing in San Jose, California. One of the most pressing struggles he was dealing with was a relationship breakup. This emotional turmoil had begun to take a toll on him, affecting his mental and emotional state more deeply than those around him may have realized. Brian's father grew increasingly alarmed by his son's emotional state and sudden disappearance. After days of no contact and growing unease, he made the difficult decision to contact the authorities and report Brian missing. His concern was intensified by the fact that following the recent breakup, Brian had openly expressed thoughts of ending his own life. These alarming signs made his absence even more distressing, raising fears that something terrible might have happened to him. The last confirmed sighting of Brian was in December 1984. He had left his home telling his father he was on his way to work. However, he never arrived at his job, and no one had seen or heard from him since. This unexplained disappearance prompted the police to launch an investigation, hoping to trace his last known movements and uncover any clues that could explain where he had gone or what had happened to him. The detectives began the process of piecing together Brian's final steps. They questioned family members, friends, and coworkers, looking for any indication of his mental state or possible intentions. But unfortunately, the case went cold. Despite the identification, the exact cause and manner of Brian's death remain unclear. The decomposition of the remains and the passage of time left little evidence behind. However, for Brian's family, finally knowing his fate provided a sense of peace they had been denied for 40 years. July 1962, a 20-year-old woman left her Reedsburg, Wisconsin home and never returned. Despite numerous leads over the years, the case went cold until a breakthrough decades later. Audrey Backeberg was born in 1942. Originally named Audrey Jean Good, she was raised in the small rural town of Reedsburg located in Sauk County, central Wisconsin. Audrey's life took a serious turn at a very young age. At just 15 years old, she married Ronald Backeberg. Such a young marriage was unusual but not unheard of in that era, particularly in rural communities. The responsibilities of married life quickly followed, and Audrey soon became a mother. She and Ronald had 2 young children together, and despite her youth, she embraced her role as a mother with deep love and devotion. By the age of 20, Audrey had already experienced more than many of her peers. She balanced the challenges of being a young wife and mother with remarkable strength. However, behind the appearance of a quiet domestic life, there were shadows beginning to grow. On July 7, 1962, Audrey left her family's home and set out for the local woolen mill where she worked. Her intention was simple: she was going there to pick up her paycheck. However, Audrey never returned home. When hours passed without word from her, her absence became a growing concern. Her husband, Ronald, reached out to her relatives to ask if anyone had seen or heard from her. No one had. Realizing that something was wrong, Ronald went to the police to file a missing person report. He told the authorities that Audrey had left that morning to collect her paycheck and never came back. The police officers began looking into possible explanations for her disappearance, interviewing family members, friends, and coworkers in an attempt to trace her movements. After leaving home, the investigation sought to uncover whether she had met with an accident, left voluntarily, or been the victim of foul play. Shortly after, Audrey was reported missing. A 14-year-old babysitter who sometimes cared for the couple's children came forward with information. She claimed that she and Audrey had hitchhiked from Reedsburg to Madison and then taken a bus to Indianapolis. According to the babysitter, once they arrived in Indianapolis, she herself decided not to return home. Audrey, however, was last seen walking alone near a bus stop in the city. That sighting would be the final confirmed account of her movements. As the investigation progressed, the police uncovered information suggesting that Audrey's home life may not have been as stable as it appeared. Reports indicated that Audrey had previously filed a complaint with the authorities regarding domestic abuse, alleging that her marriage was abusive. This revelation added a troubling layer to the case, raising questions about whether her disappearance might have been connected to her personal life. Over the years, the investigators followed numerous leads in hopes of finding Audrey. They spoke to individuals who had known her, tracked reported sightings, and examined possible links to other cases. Yet each lead eventually reached a dead end. Without new evidence, progress was slow and frustrating for those seeking answers. Ultimately, the search for Audrey grew cold. In May 2002, 4 decades after Audrey Backeberg vanished, the investigators announced plans to search a Sauk County property based on information from an informant who claimed that her body had been buried there. The lead was treated seriously, but law enforcement made it clear they were uncertain about the truth of the claim. The police stated that they did not know exactly what had happened to Audrey or whether she had met with foul play. One officer remarked, "We do not know if she is simply a missing person living a life somewhere else. We do know there has been no activity on her social security number." This absence of financial or official records since her disappearance only deepened the mystery. The 2002 property search raised hopes for a breakthrough, but no human remains were found, and the trail once again went cold. Then in early 2025, the case was reassigned as part of a broader review of cold case files. Investigators took a fresh look at all available records, determined to see if overlooked details could bring new clarity. The process involved re-examining evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, and carefully piecing together the fragments of information that had been gathered over the decades. During this renewed investigation, the sheriff's office uncovered new insights that shifted the direction of the case. Among the findings was an out-of-state arrest record that matched Audrey Backeberg's identity. This discovery prompted further inquiries, which ultimately confirmed that the woman in question was indeed the same person who had gone missing in 1962. Further investigation revealed that Audrey's disappearance had been by her own choice and was not the result of criminal activity or foul play. The sheriff's office confirmed that she had left voluntarily, and the long-standing mystery surrounding her fate was rooted in personal circumstances rather than violence. One police officer remarked, "She is happy, safe, and secure, and just kind of lived under the radar for that long." The decision to leave had been deeply personal, and as records showed was motivated in part by the abusive nature of her marriage, a situation she had reportedly reported to the authorities only days before she vanished in 1962. Over the years, Audrey had built an entirely new life for herself. She adopted a new identity, remarried, and settled far from Wisconsin, choosing to keep her past a closed chapter. She maintained a quiet, low-profile existence, successfully avoiding public attention for more than 6 decades. This deliberate separation from her former life allowed her to create stability and peace on her own terms. When a detective finally reached her in 2025, Audrey agreed to speak by phone. The conversation lasted 45 minutes, during which she expressed no regrets about the decision she had made so many years earlier. She was confident in her choice and made it clear that her priority remained her privacy. While willing to speak to the investigators to confirm her safety, she emphasized that she did not wish for her location or personal details to be disclosed. 82-year-old Audrey continues to live out of state, her exact whereabouts known only to law enforcement. For her family, the news brought a complex wave of emotions. Many had lived for decades, unsure whether she had passed away, been harmed, or was simply gone without explanation. Learning that she was alive was both a relief and a shock. The revelation reopened old feelings and raised new questions, but it also offered closure to a mystery that had haunted them for generations. While contact between Audrey and her surviving relatives remains uncertain, the detective handling the case has offered support should she choose to reconnect. Her decision to remain private is respected, leaving her story as one of survival, reinvention, and the enduring weight of a life lived away from the past. In January 1995, a 12-year-old girl waited for her school bus in Cleveland, Ohio, when a man carrying a gun forced her into the back of his van. The DNA from an assault kit would only be matched decades later. On January 11, 1995, a man armed with a firearm approached a 12-year-old girl who was waiting for her school bus near East 53rd Street and Fleet Avenue. He forced her into the back of his van and drove her to an apartment. There, he assaulted the child before driving her to her school. Once at school, the young victim informed her principal about the assault. She was then taken to a nearby hospital where medical professionals collected an assault kit. A male DNA profile was developed from the evidence, but the sample did not match anyone listed in the existing offender database at the time. As years passed and the case remained unsolved, the prosecutors took action to prevent it from being dismissed due to time limitations. With the statute of limitations approaching, they sought and secured a grand jury indictment. The charges were not filed against a named person, but rather against the unknown DNA profile obtained from the 1995 assault kit. The indictment included 2 counts of assault and 1 count of kidnapping, effectively keeping the case active. In 2023, the investigators with the prosecutor's cold case unit were able to link the previously unidentified DNA profile to Eric Washington. Following this breakthrough, the grand jury amended the indictment to include Washington's name, officially charging him with the crimes. Common Pleas Judge Kevin Kelly presided over Washington's bench trial and found him guilty on all counts. This led to an amended indictment and Washington's conviction on 2 counts of assault and 1 count of kidnapping, bringing a measure of justice after decades of waiting. On May 21, 2025, Judge Kelly sentenced 73-year-old Washington to life in prison with the possibility of parole only after serving 70 years. This harsh sentence reflected the severity of the crimes and the impact they had on the victim's life. Court records reveal a troubling history, showing that Washington had prior convictions for battery in 1988 and stalking in 1994. Additionally, he was convicted of assault in 1973. Washington, who resides in Wheeling, West Virginia, has indicated plans to appeal his sentencing. In response to the verdict, prosecutor Michael O'Malley commented, "She has waited 30 years for justice, and today's verdict is a significant step toward that." Records also show that Washington pleaded guilty to battery in Cuyahoga County in 1988 and was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. In August 2014, outside the Kern County Courthouse in Bakersfield, California, the lifeless body of a 43-year-old man was discovered by the Kern County Vietnam War Memorial. Despite initial efforts, the investigation stalled and the case went cold for more than a decade. Christopher Wagstaff was born in 1971. At 43 years old, he was a resident of Clayton, California. In August 2014, Christopher encountered trouble with the law. He was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence, a serious charge that can have lasting consequences. The arrest suggested a lapse in judgment, though whether it was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern remains unknown. The authorities took him into custody. That same evening after his arrest, Christopher was released from custody. At the time, it may have seemed like the end of the matter, a legal problem that would be addressed in due course, and life would go on. Yet this release would soon be viewed in a far more ominous light. The events that followed would cast the decision to let him go in a deeply unsettling context. The hours after his release were unremarkable on the surface, at least to anyone outside his immediate circle. There were no public warnings, no heightened concerns voiced by the authorities, and no reason for the public to suspect that danger was brewing. Christopher returned to the outside world, free to move about as he pleased, unaware that the most dangerous chapter of his life was about to begin. The following morning, Christopher was discovered lying dead outside the Kern County courthouse. The discovery stunned police officials who were confronted with an unexpected and troubling scene. The investigators immediately secured the area and began gathering evidence, aware that the courthouse steps were the site of a violent crime. The circumstances of his death raised immediate questions about what had occurred in the hours after his release from custody. An autopsy later confirmed that Christopher had suffered blunt force trauma, and his death was officially ruled a murder. The finding left no doubt in the investigators' minds. His injuries had not been self-inflicted. One police official made a brief but pointed remark: somebody else ended his life. It is pretty obvious, but we are not going to talk about it while the investigation is ongoing. The comment made it clear that foul play was involved, but details about possible suspects or motives were withheld. The police also revealed more about the events leading up to Christopher's release. He had been arrested a little after 10 p.m. on August 29th on suspicion of driving under the influence. In addition, the charge included child endangerment, as there was a child in the vehicle at the time. The authorities declined to say how old the child was or whether the child was related to Christopher, leaving the public with unanswered questions about the incident. The arrest had taken place near Lake Isabella, a location roughly an hour from Bakersfield. Following the arrest, Christopher was transported to Bakersfield and booked into the county jail, which was located in the basement of the same building that housed the courthouse. This proximity made the eventual location of his body all the more unsettling. Christopher was released from custody at around 10:00 p.m. on Saturday night. From that moment until the discovery of his body the next morning, the events remain unclear. The police worked to piece together a timeline of his movements, hoping to identify where he had gone, who he had been with, and what might have led to his death in such a public location. Despite their efforts, the investigators were unable to uncover any solid leads. Witnesses, if there were any, did not come forward, and no physical evidence emerged to point toward a suspect. 1 month after Christopher's death in September 2014, Bakersfield police had released surveillance footage showing a person of interest in the crime. The video depicted an unidentified individual wearing a light-colored shirt and dark shorts while pushing a shopping cart. The man stops just north of the memorial. He leaves the shopping cart and walks toward the area out of view of the camera, where Christopher's body was later found. He leaves that area about 90 seconds later and stands by a light pole. Then he returns to the crime scene area, reappearing a minute later. He walks away while pushing the shopping cart. A search of areas where it was believed the suspect may have gone turned up a shopping cart in the south parking lot of the Bakersfield City Council building. It contained an empty Red Bull can, 2 plastic Fast-Drip soft drink cups, a plastic milk carton, and significantly pieces of broken rocks consistent with rocks found by Christopher's body. At the time, the investigators hoped that the public could help identify the person, offering a reward of up to $5,000 for information that would lead to an arrest and the filing of charges. Despite these efforts, no arrests were made. In that same month, Christopher's wife publicly expressed her grief and confusion. She said the following in an emotional statement: "I just want to know why. Why did they have to take such a wonderful man away?" She called for justice and admitted that she had no idea why anyone would have targeted her husband. Her words echoed the community's frustration over the lack of progress and the mystery surrounding his case. Without new information, the case eventually went cold, leaving Christopher's case an unresolved mystery. A major development in the long unsolved case came a decade later on May 2, 2025, when the detectives interviewed Jeremy Daniel Cruzen, who was already serving time for unrelated offenses. During this interview, new information emerged that shifted the direction of the investigation. Just 6 days later on May 8th, the authorities formally charged Cruzen in connection to Christopher Wagstaff's death. The announcement marked the first significant breakthrough in over a decade, offering hope that the case might finally see resolution. His involvement in the case came as a surprise to many given that for years the trail had gone cold. The renewed legal action promised to bring long-awaited answers, but it also raised fresh questions about how exactly he was connected to the events outside the Kern County Courthouse on that August night in 2014. Official records show that at the time of his arrest, he was being held at the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. He had been admitted there in May of the previous year and was eligible for parole in June, suggesting that his identification as a suspect came just before his potential release. Cruzen told the Bakersfield police detectives that he acted in self-defense when he hit a man in the head with a rock in August 2014 by the Kern County Vietnam War Memorial. He said that he was fighting off an attempted inappropriate assault. But the investigators say that the crime scene, however, indicated otherwise. Based on the injuries suffered by Christopher, it is likely that he was lying down when a large rock was slammed down on his head. According to court documents, his injuries indicated that he was then hit with smaller rocks. Cruzen made a number of bizarre statements, including that Christopher had survived, but was then shot by Bakersfield police. That was easily disproved, as Christopher's body had no gunshot wounds. Cruzen stated that he wishes for a lesser charge, but it was not granted. He is charged in the first degree and is being held without bail. He told the detectives that he did not make a habit of ending the lives of people, and that he did not want them to think that he blatantly killed somebody. Cruzen was identified thanks in part to fingerprints that were left on the Red Bull found in the shopping cart near the crime scene. Cruzen faces felony murder charges and is awaiting arraignment, with court proceedings expected to begin shortly after the formal charge. He is due back in court late August.